Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me here yet again. And if we can all put our phones away and give me attention for the next 1 hour, I'd be very happy. Okay. Uh, Topic today is a question. What's your story? So I'm going to start with a story. Usually I try to start with, I usually love to tell stories. So I like to start with a story. But I've always wanted to start without an introduction, but I cannot help saying hello to all of you, and I love the hello that I receive back. Anyway. Hi. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived with very loving parents in a great big palace. She was happy, she was playful, she was always running around in the garden. And her parents very lovingly called her Ella. One day, unfortunately, tragedy struck when she was very little. Her mother developed an illness and she passed away. Little Ella's life changed after that. She was heartbroken, she was sad, she was lonely, but more lonely than her was her father. After many years of trying to raise his daughter on his own, not too many years, but years enough, he decided to get married again. And he found a woman, maybe she was a widow as well, who had two daughters. And he decided to marry her thinking that Ella deserved to have a mother in her life. Because every child needs a mothering, every child needs nurturing. So he got married amidst all fanfare in this big palace. Everybody was invited. Celebrations were afoot. Everybody had a gala time. Celebrations passed. The relatives went away. Life went back to routine. The life that Ella wanted was not the one that she wanted, or what she got was not the one that she had dreamt of. She got an evil stepmother who didn't wish anything good for Ella. In fact, she wished her very bad because she wasn't her own daughter. And she had two daughters. She treated them very well. And Ella was made to do all the tasks at home. She had to cook for the family. She had to clean the whole palace by herself. She had to look after her stepsisters, do their makeup, do their hair, do everything. And what did she get in return? Abuses. She got scolded. Her room was taken away from her. That lavish, beautiful castle in the room in the palace where she lived, that was taken away from her. And she got a small little place near the fire of the kitchen place, near the stove. So she started living under cinders. You know what are cinders?
Burnt wood.
Yes, burnt wood. She started living there among cinders. Over a period of time, she got so teased by her stepsisters, her evil stepmother, and finally they decided to call her Cinderella. And Cinderella lived like this all through her life, doomed to her this life of nothing, to this life of abuse, to this life of unkindness, to this life of no joy, only sorrow and cruelty and teasing. And she had decided that her life was like that she was committed to living amongst the cinders. That beautiful, fair, beautiful, flowing, golden-haired girl called Ella was reduced to literally ashes, reduced to rags, reduced to, her face just covered with cinders, reduced to somebody called Cinderella. One day, there was big talk in the village or in that country, on the countryside where they belonged, because there was another palace. And there was the king who ruled that palace, and his son was throwing a big, grand ball for everybody. And he was a bachelor. So what's lovely about it? A rich young man, a prince, lots of wealth, lots of money, handsome man at that. Which girl wouldn't go for it? So he had decided to have a ball because he wanted to also find a suitor, a girl worthy of his esteem, his position in life. So there was much fanfare and much ado and much excitement in the Cinderella household. Because her stepsisters were very keen to go for that ball, because they were like, no, 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 you know what, I'm going to get the prince. And the sisters were fighting amongst each other, saying, no, I'm going to get the prince. No, I'm going to get the prince. They all were competing with each other to dress better, to look beautiful, do their hair and do their clothes. And Cinderella was running up and down, getting so many things organized for these two girls. So at one point, Cinderella was curious. She asked her stepsisters about the ball. She wanted to know the details because she had dreams. She wanted to know what it was like. Because she lost her right in the palace when she was very young. She grew up her whole life. She grew her whole life among cinders. She didn't know anything else. What the stepsisters did was they laughed at her and said, "What? You, look at you. You're covered in cinder. You're dirty. You're a piece of rag. You want to go to the ball? You want to meet a handsome prince? Who do you think you are? You think you're a princess? No. You're worse than a maid. So get on with it. Come on, get cracking. Get us ready. Make us look presentable and beautiful for the prince, so that he might take one of us as his bride." So Cinderella did that. She became submissive. She became subdued. She couldn't talk back. She couldn't fight back. She couldn't say anything. She didn't even have the support of her father. She didn't even tell her father what was happening, because her father was mostly away hunting or running his business elsewhere. So he was hardly at home. And Cinderella became very lonely and became so sad. Finally, the day of the ball arrived. And there was this beautiful chariot which was organized for her stepsisters. Her stepsisters and her stepmother, all of them dressed very well. I wouldn't say they were looking very pretty, but they were dressed very well in their top finery, and they went to the ball. That day, Cinderella felt more sad than she has ever felt in her life. And she sat amongst the cinders and she cried and she wept and she wept and she wept. Because she said, "What have I done to deserve this? Why can't I be at the ball? Why can't I enjoy my life like everybody else?" And she wept and she felt so lost and she felt so alone. She missed her mother. At that minute, there was a bright flash from the sky. And in that flash descended down in the form of an angel. And there was this stranger standing in front of her. Cinderella was shocked. She said, "Is this an apparition? Or is this lady real?" So she, very scared she timidly went up and she asked, "Who are you?" She said, "My dear Cinderella, I have come here to make your wish come true. Tell me what you want." She said, but who are you? "But I don't know who you are." She said, "I'm the one who's going to make it happen for you. I'm the one who's going to make your wish come true. I'm the one who's going to fulfill your dream. I am your fairy godmother. And with the wave of a magic wand, I can give you anything that you want." So she said, "Okay, so what do you want now? Tell me." She said, "I want to go to the ball." She said, "Is that it? You want to go meet the Prince Charming? So go." She said, "But how can I go like this? Look at my clothes. These are not clothes, these are rags, and it's torn, it's tattered, it's dirty. Look at me, I'm dirty. How can I go? Who will even bear to look at me? And if I go, then my stepsisters and my stepmother will catch me and they will send me back. They'll punish me, they'll beat me, they'll scold me." So the fairy godmother said, "Cinderella, Cinderella, Cinderella, I am here to transform you. Do you want to really go? Is that your wish? Is that your desire? Is that what you really want right now?" She said, "Yes." She said, "How badly do you want it?" She said, "I want it with all my life, with all my heart, with all my soul." So she said, "Okay, let's make you pretty." So she took her magic wand and she waved it 3 times, whoosh, 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 and she brought it down on Cinderella, and there she was, beautiful pink gown with silver and diamonds sparkling, and her hair done beautifully, and her face done beautifully, all the makeup, and she was glowing. She was the most gorgeous creature that you could ever see on the face of this earth. And she had beautiful slippers, the famous glass slippers. And she looked stunning. She was the epitome of splendor. Said, okay, what next? She said, fairy godmother, I'm looking beautiful. Thank you for transforming me. But how will I go to the ball? So she said, okay, run to the garden and fetch me a pumpkin. She said, pumpkin? What can I do with a pumpkin? So Cinderella said, do you believe me or you do not believe me? She said, yes, 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 I believe you. So she went and got a pumpkin. And then she said, okay, now see if you can find 2 mice. So she went and got herself 2 mice. And then she said, find me one more creature in the garden. So she went and found it. And then the fairy, she moved the wand again, waved the wand again, and boom, bam, boom, bam, the pumpkin turned into a chariot. The 2 mice turned into 2 guards who were going to stand and guard that chariot. And the other creature, whoever that was from the garden, turned into the charioteer. And she said, here you go. You are ready to go to the ball and nobody is going to recognize you because you transformed yourself. Now go, Cinderella, and have fun. Enjoy yourself. But remember, before the clock strikes 12, you have to be back here. So she said, yes, 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 godmother, yes, yes, I will. Thank you so much, thank you so much, thank you so much. She got into the chariot and away she went to the ball. And when she entered, the entire banquet hall froze and they went into a deep silence because they were stunned. They were stunned at this gorgeous beauty he was walking in. While her stepsisters had this little question mark saying, she looks familiar. Is she? No. Cinderella cannot turn out to be so beautiful. No chance, that is not her. But who is she? And they were jealous. All the young girls in the ballroom were jealous because they said, Prince Charming is going to go for her. Look at her. She's so beautiful. She is like an angel who has come down from the earth. Who the hell is she? So there were whispers going around everywhere. People saying, could she be from the neighboring village? Could she be from another country? Could she be just an angel? Is she an apparition? Is she real? Who is she? What is she? And the prince was taken up beyond anybody else. And for the rest of the evening, he couldn't take his eyes off her. He couldn't dance with anybody else. And as they waltzed around the ballroom, swaying and lost into each other's eyes and in the music, the clock began to strike. 1, 2, 3. Suddenly Cinderella froze. She said, oh my God. The fairy godmother said that I have to leave and I have to be home by the time the clock strikes 12. The clock has already started striking. I better run. So she let go of the prince. She said, I'm sorry, but I have to run. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I have to run. And she ran. And the prince ran after her. And she ran down the flight of stairs. And on the way, she dropped her glass slipper. But she ran nevertheless. And welcome. I was just telling the story of Cinderella. And so where were we? So Cinderella. Yes.
In the glass slipper, up to the glass. What happened to the slipper? I don't know.
Okay. So it's also good to know that you were all listening. So she dropped the glass slipper and she ran and ran and ran down the stairs and she ran across the meadow. The chariot was waiting, as was the charioteer and the guards. They were all waiting and said, come on, we have to go, we have to hurry, come on, let's go. Cinderella didn't know what was going to happen if 12 o'clock had passed. She didn't know, but all she knew that she had to keep her promise to the fairy godmother. So she got inside. The prince was chasing after her, but Cinderella was much faster because she had to get somewhere before time ran out. So she got into the chariot and she was off. The prince caught up with her and all he got was the glass slipper. Now he didn't know where she had gone. She seemed to have just disappeared like magic. Poof. A glorious, beautiful angel, seemed to be an angel who was here, just vanished into thin hair. He couldn't understand. But his heart was bereft. He was aching. He wanted to know where to find her. He wanted to know. He said, I'm going to search the entire village. He determined, just with this glass slipper, I'm going to find out who she is and I'm going to make her my bride. That was his part of the story. We are not going there. We are only going to talk about Cinderella. So finally Cinderella, by the time she reached home, the clock had struck 12. She was just short of her home. And her whole fantasy, that whole thing, the beauty started melting. The chariot disappeared and became a big pumpkin lying on the middle of the road. The two guards at the back went back to being mice and they scurried away into the darkness. And that guard became the lizard, the charioteer became the lizard, and he went away on another side. And Cinderella's gorgeous, beautiful dress was back to the rags that she was in before the fairy godmother came to her. Her one glass slipper disappeared and became nothing. She was bare feet again. And she trudged all the way back home. She walked back. Luckily, she wasn't too far away. And luckily, she got back home before her stepmother and her stepsisters did. So she went back to her life of cinders. She went back to Cinderella. Just for those few hours in her life, she was the Ella. And now she was back to Cinderella. The story goes on from there. But I'm going to stop this story right here. Because this brings me back to the topic of today, is what's your story? When you said that when I told you this fairy tale, it took you back to your childhood. Let's go back into your childhood. You felt happy when you heard this story because it reminded you of a time when your life was full of magic and full of wonder. You loved the Disney cartoons, you loved Tom and Jerry, and we were just talking about that, and who's cleverer, Jerry Mouse or Tom Cat, and Tweety and Sylvester, and we lived in a life of fairy tales, we lived in a life of magic. We lived in a life of fairies, and we also fought demons, and we fought, we had like so many of our own monsters, but they never bothered us. We lived a different story when we were young. What happens after that? As we grow, the fairy tales disappear. That magic that we have lived, that magic that we thought we were part of that magic. How many of you have read Enid Blyton, Famous Five, Secret Seven, Nancy Drew Mysteries? How many, for the more recent times, Harry Potter, witches and wizards?
In the house.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, it was crazy finding the
Exactly. Agatha Christie novels. We lost ourselves in that mystery, right? We lost ourselves in that suspense. We became that. And that is why when we were young, we had such a stress-free life. Because we became our stories. We became those stories, not our stories. We became those stories that we read, those stories that we identify with, those stories where we never questioned even for a minute. Are they true? Are they practical? Is it going to help me in my life? Where is it going to get me? That is one story. I'm going to tell you a part of another story of a guy called Shaurya. What does Shaurya mean? The name Shaurya means bravery, means courage. So he lived in Jaipur. This is the story that I read from a book that I picked up yesterday. And he had dreams. Having been brought up in a small place like Jaipur, not so small, but compared to Bombay, it's a smaller city, right? He had big dreams. His father was a regular businessman. His mother was a regular housewife. There was nothing magical in their family. It was a very ordinary family, like most of the 90% of the families that are there. He went to school, college the way he did, like we all did. But he had a dream. What was his dream? He wanted to come to Bombay, go to film school and become a film director. His father was a very strict man. And he had a very harsh way of speaking to his son, thinking that that is the way he can show him love. By speaking harshly, he thought he showed his son he cared. One day he sat his parents down at the dining table and spoke to them and said, you know what, I'm very nervously, of course, stuttering and stammering, like I do sometimes when I speak, saying that I want to go to Bombay and I want to become a film director. I want to study film making. So his father scoffed at the idea. He said, what? What is wrong with you? How can you achieve this? How do you know that you're going to get your dream? What if nothing happens? What if your dream doesn't come true? And what is this? Film director, go do your CA. I've paid for your, your exam, your admission. Go do your CA and get into the family business. That's enough. At least your future is set. He didn't know how to say no to his father. He didn't know how to tell his father, no, I want to go and I want to live my dream. He didn't know how to say it. He didn't have the courage. But what he would do is every week, he would go to the train station in Jaipur and sit on a bench. And the train to Mumbai would come and stand at the platform. And every time he wanted to get up and he wanted to go, it was like almost that there was glue which had stuck him to the seat. He could not get up. One day when he was sitting there was a man who came and sat next to him. Started talking to him and said, so, is this the platform number 2 where the train to Mumbai comes? So he says, yes, sir. If you are going to Mumbai, this is the platform. So, are you waiting for the train, young man? So he said, yes, sir, I'm waiting. No, sir, I'm not waiting. I don't know, sir, whether I'm waiting for the train or not. This was his reply. So he said, okay, why are you so hesitant? You seem to have some ache in your heart. You seem to have a dream in your soul. What is that dream? So the Shaurya told this old man the dream, the older man. So the older man looked at him and smiled and said, you know what? At one time in my life, I was like you. A young man with a vision, a young man with a big dream, a young man who wanted to break all boundaries, all conditioning and achieve whatever I wanted at all costs. He said, I went against family, I went against tradition, I went against society, I went against norms, I went against everything, I broke every ideology. And I achieved what I wanted to achieve. So, what do you want to do? Do you want to look back when you're 60 years old, or 70 years old, or 80 years old, or on your deathbed maybe? Do you want to look back into your life and ask yourself, what have I done? How have I lived? Have I lived the way I wanted to live? Or have I lived somebody else's dream? Have I lived somebody else's life? What is that life? What is the question you want to ask yourself? He asked the young man. What do you think the young man said? No. The first response I got from him was what the young man said, silence. There was nothing. That man, he didn't know what to say. Shaurya didn't know what to say. The train came onto the platform. The older man got up and he said, okay, come on, let's go. Come on, get up. Come on, this is your time now. This is your time to make it or break it. Come on, let's go. Shaurya got up, but he was trembling and he was sweating. Now the glue had changed from the seat to under his feet. He couldn't move. The train started whistling, started hooting because it was time for it to leave the station. The older man was still there. He was saying, come on, young man, come on, let's go, let's go. He started walking towards the train, but Shaurya couldn't move. And finally, the older man said, okay, you know what, there's nothing I can do for you. I cannot literally drag you. You have to unglue yourself. You have to unstick yourself from all of this that is holding you, the barbed wires that are holding you. You have to come. You have to find your freedom. Saying that, he ran, he got into the train, and the train left for Bombay, and Shaurya went back to his home, to that dull, dreary CA college that he was attending, back to the studies of accounting and auditing and all of that he was doing. Tired, weary, fed up with life. I'm going to stop this story also here. How true does this ring for a lot of us in our lives? What is the story that you tell yourself every day? And how have you changed from that young person who believed in fairy tales to who you are now? What is that boundary that stops you from getting what you want to get? What are those fences that stop you from where you want to go? Who has stopped you? Anybody?
From going to a comfort zone to uncomfort zone.
We're going to talk about the comfort versus discomfort zone very soon. But just about daring to dream.
I should say glue in the brain.
Yeah, exactly. So who has put the glue in your brain? What happened to that childlike innocence? What happened to that child who believed in fairy tales? Who believed in dreams? There's a popular saying that says dreams are only for those who sleep. But there are also waking dreams. So where is that? Where is that person gone? Whatever we are today are a product of two things. One is the stories that we have been told, not the fairy tales which we were allowed to live for a few years of our lives, but the stories of practicality, the stories of what is achievable and not achievable, the stories of what you can do, but more than that, what you cannot do, the stories of what you should not do in your life. We have grown up with those. Plus, based on those which have formed the basis, like a foundation of this enormous building that we've built, this house full of glue in our brain we've built, we are the product of our own story that we have told ourselves. Unfortunately, our story is one of limitation, stagnation, scarcity, and fear. Let's look at Cinderella and instant gratification. Let's look at Cinderella. When the fairy godmother came to her and instantly she got what she wanted, she was so thrilled. But why didn't it go beyond that? Why did her chariot turn into a pumpkin, go back into a pumpkin? Why did her charioteer turn back into a lizard? Why did those guards turn back into mice? How does that translate into the lives that we lead, and why do we feel that sometimes life does not work the way we want it to work? Because we believe in instant gratification. What we want is, if we decide on something now, it should happen now. And something that happens now, it also disappears now. Why does it disappear now? Because you have not changed your story. The story that you're telling yourself is the same. The story that Cinderella was telling herself was that she was committed to a life amongst cinder, among burnt wood. She was committed to the life of a story. She was committed to the story that her life, she was a slave. She was lower than somebody else. She was not good enough, maybe. She was beautiful, but she was not as grand as her stepsisters. Furthermore, what else could she have thought? If I was good enough, why is life treating me this way? That is a question so many people, maybe you don't ask, but that is a question so many people ask themselves. If you've heard, no? If I am so good, why am I going through such a bad time? Why am I stuck in this doldrum? Why is everything bad happening to me? Nothing beyond what you want is happening to you. So now what happened was that when Cinderella went back into her cinders, she started living a life of doom. She started living and believing that this was her life. Comes to the next part of the story, is when the prince took this glass slipper, went from house to house, house to house, and the girls and the women were so hell-bent on getting this prince as her husband that they tried to squeeze their foot into the glass slipper. Even if it was big, they said, no, see, wow, it fits so fine. And if it was tight, they said, no, we can somehow manage. But the prince said, no, this is not right. So I've still not reached that girl. And finally, he made his way to the palace where Cinderella lived. Her two stepsisters came out. Of course, that is what they do. And they tried and they fit into the glass slipper. They couldn't, because it was not theirs. And the prince at that time asked, is there anybody else in this palace who I can meet? And the stepsister said, no, 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 no. Nobody worthwhile. So he said, what do you mean worthwhile? No, 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 Prince, Your Majesty, nobody worth your standard. Nobody who is equal to you. We are the only two girls who are equal to you. Even the stepmother actually tried the slipper on a bit. So he said, okay. The prince was crestfallen, but he wasn't going to give up. At one point he believed that he was never going to find his princess. But what he did was, by determination, he changed the story, his story in his mind, and he said, no, I am going to find this princess, and if I marry, I will marry only her and nobody else. So he got out, he was about to mount his horse, when he happened to look up, and through a small window, Cinderella had actually gone to the attic to look through the small window to see what was all this noise and sound about. And she saw the prince and he saw her. And he came back into the castle and he said, there's somebody here and I want to see who she is. I want her to try the slipper. And the stepmother said, no, Your Majesty, what is wrong with you? She's a servant. She's not worth your time. Just ignore her. She's Cinderella. She lives among the cinders. She's a rag. She's nobody. She's not a person. The stepsister said, no, 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 please, we agree, please, no, no. Take one of us, choose one of us. He said, no. I want her and I want her to come and try the slipper. It doesn't matter if it doesn't fit. So reluctantly, the stepmother went and brought Cinderella out. And when she tried the glass slipper, voila, it fit beautifully. At that time, the prince knew that he had found his princess. And the rest of the story goes that the stepsisters were amazed, alarmed and annoyed and extremely aggressive that, what? Was she the one who came to the ball? My God, and they were fighting with each other saying, I told you she looked familiar, I told you this and I told you that. But nothing else mattered. He swept Cinderella away on her feet, put her on horseback, took her to his palace and they lived happily ever after. What happened to Shaurya still remains to be seen. It's still a mystery. Did he change his story? Or did he not change his story? What do you think? What should he have done? We know Cinderella's story. We know that she went and lived happily ever after. What do you think about Shaurya?
Board the train.
He did board the train at some point? He didn't. Why do you think he didn't?
No, not trying to change scared.
It's a good boy from a good family.
Yeah,
Follow what his parents say.
that's right. Because it brings us back to the char log kya bolenge. What will society think?
Mindset is being, from childhood is being hammered. That mindset becomes the one that I cannot go against or something.
Exactly. How many of us live like that actually? Most people live like that. Why? Because there are a set of rules which exist, which was formed by something called a society.
It goes beyond the rules. It's a condition.
Exactly.
Powerhouse.
Yes, condition has become a powerhouse. What happened to that fairy tale? It doesn't matter whether you're 5 or 105. When are you going to live that fairy tale? What is life? Life is just a story. So every time, so now, okay, let me take a step back. There are ways in which you can view your life. So when people come to me for counseling, my clients, I tell them when they come and they sit down and ask, so how has your day been? And they'll say, yeah, so I had a bad day, I went to work and then my boss was this and this one was that and my friend said this and my mother said that and this and that and I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling agitated, I'm feeling negative, and then they go on and like that. I said, hold on, just wait. Step back, take 3 long deep breaths and start your life with the line, once upon a time, and then speak of yourself in 3rd person. So once upon a time, there was a woman called Professor Cheelu Chandran who was not professor when she was young. And then I start telling my life like a fairy tale, like a story. Everything from that point changes. And this is something that I would like you all to try at home. Whatever you have, whatever story that you're running in your head, it's not a story right now. It is a series of events. You know, it's just like a person who strings a lot of words together cannot be a writer. A writer is a person who tells a story. So you can all be a writer of your own life and rewrite your life's accounts and make them a story. Everything is a story. Since we do not know anything about life, even if we are going to be living here for 205 years, we'll never know enough about life. We'll never know enough about ourselves because we're constantly rediscovering. And if we are not, we need to be rediscovering who we are. And believe you me, we will surprise ourselves because we are an infinite source of wisdom, like I always say in all my talks. It's just that we don't know it. We are all here. I'm here to tell you this, not because I'm teaching you something. I'm just making you recognize your own self. So again, every day when you get up in the morning, ask yourself, what's my story? What is my story? If you don't know what your story is going to be for that day, obviously it's not, we cannot predict what the day is going to be. We can kind of tell, okay, you know what, I have to go to work, or I have to go to school, or I have to go to college, or wherever else I'm going, or I have to stay at home, I have to cook lunch, dinner, this, that, whatever else you're doing. You know roughly what your story is for that day, or what your deeds are for that day. How do you go from there and break that monotony? Change it to a story. So when you wake up in the morning, wake up and say, what's my story today? And then you put yourself in the third person and say, okay, if I'm watching this in a movie theater, if I'm watching this day unfold on a screen, what would I say? How would I weave in plots? You know, where is my fairy godmother? We all have. Huh? In our lives, we have magic. You know that one time when you thought of somebody and that person called, or that person showed up, or some wish you had and suddenly that wish came true and somebody made it happen and it's like, wow, that is your magic moment. So see, we have magic in our lives. We have our own fairy godmother, fairy for godfather, whatever you call it. It's the one that waves the magic wand. Somehow, maybe it's the person with whom you feel comfortable. Maybe it's the prayer that you say, or something. Somebody waves a magic wand, and something that you wish for comes. So anybody can be a fairy godmother for that particular day. Anybody can bring you magic for that particular day. It can be different every day. So why do we look for monotony? So what is your story? How are you going to write your story for that day? And what happens when you start writing your story is you start looking at all of these magic moments. You start looking at fairy god people who come into your life. Little miracles along the way. You start seeing these things. And I'm telling you, it's an automatic association when you start rewriting your story. And why do I say rewrite your story in the third person? The problem with all of us is because the I is attached to I cannot. The I is attached to insufficient. The I is attached to incapability. So I cannot do this. This is beyond my capacity. I am incapable. But a Cheelu can. A Suresh can. An X can. A Y can. A Z can. A Mr. Lad can. When you start putting yourself outside of yourself, you will find that whatever you want to achieve, you can. However you want to rewrite your story, you can. Because you're not judging yourself. You are not looking at those fences that are keeping you encompassed and engulfed in that, enveloped in that whole thing where you can't breathe and you're sitting like this in boxes. Remove yourself from that. Free yourself and rewrite your story. So every day you ask yourself, what's my story? And even if like Cinderella, it was about that instant gratification, What happened in those moments when she got instantly gratified by the transformation that she received? Something within her changed. And at those moments when she lived her dream, she gave her all and everything. In those moments, she changed her story. And even though temporarily she seemed to get back to the cinders, get back to living that hopeless, loveless life, she had already created a difference. She had already created a prince who came and who took her away from that. So we all have our evil stepmothers. We all have our evil stepsisters. But fortunately, more than them existing externally, they exist internally. They exist in this place called the mind. The mind will not let you rewrite your story because your mind is subjective and subjected to I cannot. The mind is subjected to fear, the mind is subjected to limitation. Because the mind can only think like that. Your being, on the other hand, where your infinite source of wisdom lies within you, is actually infinite. It can actually dream and it can rewrite your story any way you want. But you need to rewrite that story. So every day you wake up, actually rewrite a story. Actually write, if you don't want to think about it, write it down. And say that, maybe not once upon a time, but on this day today, on the 2nd of March or 3rd of March 2017, there was this young woman or this young man, gentleman called so and so, and this is how his day is going to go. Or at the end of the day, rewrite your story. This is how his day went. On this day, this is how his day went. When you start doing that, believe you me, the things that you did not see will start coming up. The evil ones that you had to conquer in your mind, they will all start coming up. But keep rewriting and keep rewriting this story. What will happen? It will start connecting you back to that place when you believed in magic. When you were a child, you believed in that because you didn't judge it. When you grew up, you thought it wasn't practical. What is practical? What is that thing? What does be real mean? What does do practical mean? Anything you start, anything you say can pass or fail. There are no guarantees. So if there are no guarantees, why not take a risk and live the life that you want to live? So how can that happen? Is by changing the story that you tell yourself. For too long now, you've lived by the story that the world has told you to live. That society, whatever that is, wherever that is, has told you to live. You've lived by those rules. Now it's time to remove all that. There are no rules. There is no conditioning. It is only the story that we have told ourselves that we are conditioned to believe these things. So remove that. Rewrite your story. Go back to that magical place that you were when you were a kid. When you were before the world got to you. Because you know why? As long as you are alive, the child that you once were is still alive. Thank you.
Thank you.